We are back again with another Prelims power play related environment discussion, and today's topic will be covering Conference of Parties 28 that was recently conducted in UAE. So yes, what is the Conference of Party? Before getting into Conference of Party, let's make this sure why this was in news, because Conference of Party 28 was recently conducted in United Arab Emirates. So that is why that is the context of the news. And what is this COP or Conference of Parties that we come across every day? Conference of Party is nothing but a convention. Any convention for that matter has a grouping. This grouping or the meeting of its members, it's known as the Conference of Parties. And there is Conference of Parties for United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. There is United Nations Desertification Convention, for which we have Conference of Parties. We also have the Convention on Biological Diversity, for which we also have Conference of Parties. But this COP28, that is the Conference of Parties 28, was done for the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. So before going into the COP28 or what were the outcomes of the COP28 and issues, let us make sure what UNFCCC is. UNFCCC, that is the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, is nothing but a birth child of the Rio Earth Summit that was conducted in 1992. 1992, one major summit was conducted that just flipped the coin with respect to the environmental justice and environmental measures across the globe. So 1992, the Rio Earth Summit is being conducted, and as a birth child of this summit, various mechanisms were born. Three major mechanisms of this particular summit was the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, the Convention on Biological Diversity, and also the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification. Three major. There are also other things such as the Forest Principles, the Agenda 21 for the 21st century, and a lot of other concepts also they came out as a result of the 1992 Rio Earth Summit. But today I will be focusing on the Framework Convention on Climate Change. This Framework Convention on Climate Change was brought to address the issue of climate change, and almost universal membership was there. But later down the line, a lot of other countries, like such as developed countries, they left. They did not sign, or they drew back from this convention, and a lot of things that happened. And two important events of this particular convention was the first thing that happened in 1997, that is the Kyoto Protocol. This Kyoto Protocol is nothing but this is part of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. In fact, this particular protocol is what operationalizes the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. Yes, so that is how this 1997 Kyoto Protocol is important, and it also has another mechanism such as flexible targets, like penalties for those who do not achieve the targets. And due to all these things, all the flexible targets such as carbon offsetting, carbon emission trading mechanisms, and it also had joint implementation mechanisms, it also had clean development mechanisms. These are all flexible mechanisms that the Kyoto Protocol had within itself that operationalized the Framework Convention. So, and this particular convention, though it was signed in 1997, it came into force only in 2005, and later on in around 2017 and all, there was this another convention called as the Paris Agreement. So this Paris Agreement is also a part of the convention, part of the Framework Convention on Climate Change. And this Paris Agreement, it set as a deadline, it set as a target, such as the 1.5 degree target that we talk about, the North Pole that has been, the North Star that has been chosen for our climate actions. So yes, this is how the Framework Convention is set up. And what is this COP? COP is nothing but a meeting, a supreme decision-making authority of the members who come together at least once in a year to talk about, to stock take, to evaluate the measures done by all the other players, all the other members, and suggest new measures, mechanisms, and methods through which climate change can be avoided. Yes, recently 2028, it was conducted in UAE. And there was this final document. There were a lot of discussions, bilateral, multilateral discussions were there. And at the end of this particular discussion, one consensus was signed. One consensus was declared. There is a document known as the UAE consensus. So if at all somewhere we come across UAE consensus, it is related to climate change, and it was recently brought and it was signed in COP28 2023. Yes, and there are also other mechanisms, both global mechanisms and Indian mechanisms that have been brought. We'll first discuss the global mechanisms that were a result or outcome of the COP28, and then we'll move on to the Indian steps and actions in the COP28. So first moving on to the world mechanisms and methods. This COP28, it witnessed the launch of Global Renewables and Energy Efficiency Pledge. Global Renewables and Energy Efficiency Pledge. So what does this pledge say? This pledge initially it was brought by European Union, UAE and United States of America. USA, UAE and European Union together brought this Global Renewables and Energy Efficiency Pledge. What does this try to do is that it tries to triple renewable usage by 2030. Tries to triple renewable usage from by 2030, and it also talks about phasing down or phasing out of coal, right? The non-usage of coal and all. This particular pledge talks about. So in order to the achievement of this particular target, a lot of developing countries have not joined or not signed this particular pledge, and India is one such country who have not signed this particular pledge, because we all know the developmental mechanism, the development of India and all other developing and least developed countries, they need coal for development. So this is one thing that has been done. The next thing is that of the Global Cooling Pledge. The Global Cooling Pledge that was launched at COP28. And what does this cooling pledge tell you? A major part of emissions come from the cooling industry. Cooling industry is in the sense we have ACs that we use, we have the refrigeration systems, we have the mobile containments, we have the commercial spaces and storage units. All these things, we use refrigeration systems, and these refrigeration systems, they emit a lot of pollutants. And in order to handle this pollution, the Global Cooling Pledge was brought. And what are the components of this pledge? Is that it tries to increase the sustainable cooling mechanisms. It tries to increase sustainable cooling mechanisms by 50%. It also tries to improve the energy efficiency of air conditioners by 50%, and also to reduce cooling related emissions by 68%. So this is what the Global Cooling Pledge has set upon itself, and the members of the Global Cooling Pledge have pledged for themselves. This is what the second initiative there was that came out of the COP28. And the third thing is that of the Oil and Gas Decarbonization Charter. Oil and Gas Decarbonization Charter. This is a charter that was not signed by countries and all. It was not signed by countries. It was signed by oil producing companies, corporates. These corporates signed this Oil and Gas Decarbonization Charter in order to achieve net zero in the oil industry by 2030. All these very big oil corporates, they signed this to achieve net zero in the oil sector by 2030. So that is what this particular Oil and Gas Decarbonization Center is, Oil and Gas Decarbonization Charter is. And this UAE consensus is not one big document, but a branch of other documents. These branch documents, they together form something called as the UAE consensus. For example, we have the UAE Declaration on Food and Health, Food and Climate. We have UAE Declaration on Climate and Health. We have UAE Declaration on Climate Relief Recovery. All these things together, they form the UAE consensus. So these are the various mechanisms that have been launched in the COP28, and various reports were also released. An I on methane report was released. The drought-based reports were released. Various other reports were released with respect to the COP28, and these are the global mechanisms that were taken in the COP28. Now moving on to the Indian mechanisms, or what did India do at the COP28? The first thing that India did at the COP28 was the launch of LEAD IT 2.0. What is this LEAD IT 2.0? In 2019 itself, India and Sweden together, they launched this thing called as the LEAD IT 2.0. Nothing but a leadership group for industry transition. So that is what the LEAD IT is. It tries to transfer low carbon technology and develop emerging economies. The goal is transfer low carbon technology and develop emerging economies. So that is what the goal of LEAD IT is, and it has been spearheaded by India and Sweden. The first edition, LEAD IT 1.0, was launched in 2019, and in the recent COP28 2023 was witnessed the launch of LEAD IT 2.0. And this is what India did first. And the next thing what India did was the Green Credits program. I hope we have discussed the Green Credit program earlier in another discussion also. Same Prelims for Pay, we have discussed the Green Credits program in detail. Please do watch that also in order to have a much detailed analysis and opinion about the global Green Credit program. And the next thing that India did was it attended a meeting on Mangrove Alliance. Mangrove Alliance for Climate Action. Mangrove Alliance for Climate Action. What is this Mangrove Alliance? This Mangrove Alliance was launched in COP27. That is last COP. It was launched in COP27. And who brought this was UAE and Indonesia in order to conserve mangroves, in order to safeguard the mangrove ecosystems, and also to to disseminate message about the usefulness of mangroves in general. So this is what the target that was set for Mangrove Alliance by UAE and Indonesia. India has not joined the grouping, but yes, it has. It took part. It took part in the. It did not bring the alliance. It took part in the meetings of this Mangrove Alliance. And one thing that India brought, the last thing that we discussed today, was the Global River Cities Alliance. The Global River Cities Alliance was spearheaded, was launched by India. What is this Global River City Alliance? We all have these river cities, right? The cities that are very close to river cities and towns. So these rivers, these cities, like, they come together. Citizens, the governments, they come together in order to develop these cities sustainably, such that the river is not hampered, the river ecosystem is not hampered. So that is what a river city alliance is, and India already had river city alliance under Ministry of Jal Shakti. For example, for Ganga, we had River City Alliance and all, but now it has been taken to the global level. Global River Cities Alliance has been brought. Who has brought this Global River Cities Alliance? Two organizations. One is the National Mission for Clean Ganga, NMCG, alongside the Mississippi River Cities and Towns Initiative. Mississippi is a river that flows in North America. So Mississippi River Cities and Towns Initiative together have signed a memorandum of common purpose, or memorandum of understanding, in order to launch this Global River City Alliance. So this is what the Global River City Alliance is, and this River City Alliance it will have a secretariat in India. It will have a secretariat in India, and it will be co-hosted by two organizations, that is the National Institute of Urban Affairs under the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, and the National Mission for Clean Ganga under the Ministry of Jal Shakti. So this is what the Global River City Alliance is, alliance that tries to safeguard global rivers. Round up with this. Thank you.